Hi, and welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today, part 2 with Talor, all the way from the UK across the pond. John and Talor sat down recently. She is a mom with a daughter who is trans, and actually, I don't even know that we would call it still trans because she is in a detransition mode. There's been a lot of information that's been put forth for both the parent and the child, and as they've explored into this ideology and movement and what even Talor herself has called a cult, we've seen them really start to understand what's going on within their own lives and start to question some things. And that's led to a real world, new world experience that parents are going through all over North America and around the world, that they're just trying to get things figured out. That's why we're here. John Euler brings all this together. He's a professional clinical trauma therapist. He works with sexual predators that have been incarcerated, and his knowledge is firsthand, and his advice is obviously firsthand as well. So, John, thank you very much for being here. I always say we can never do this show without you because personally, I don't know enough, but I'm sure learning a lot. And people like Talor are also, embedded into this, and she also needs to be educated along the way from people that are providing the right message. And that's exactly why our channel's here.
And Brad, that's why we're so appreciative to have Talor back with us. We recommend people go back and watch part 1. We left off kind of a cliffhanger moment, which is, Talor, you had helped facilitate the transition of your daughter, and then, as you called it, you were peaked, you were awakened to the reality of what was going on. You described very well the characteristics of a cult and its influence on you as well. And then you had the challenge of ultimately saying no to your daughter. So you were facilitating this out of the best of intentions, and then you started to find out that she was heading toward harm. And so you started to put the brakes on, and I can only imagine what you faced, and therefore parents are at different places where you have been along that path. So describe to us what happened when you were awakened, and how did you begin that process? How did you even, I can only imagine. So I can't imagine. So share with us, especially for those parents, that if they're listening to you, or as they are listening to you, they realize, wait a second, you mean this isn't real, and I'm actually doing harm to my child? And they maybe start to listen to additional programs, either from Our Duty, which is an excellent organization, or on our program, and they realize, wait a second, this is a lie. This is not true. So talk to us about how that has gone for you with your daughter.
Yeah, I think the thing that caused me to start questioning the legitimacy of this ideology was when my daughter started talking about medicalization. So she started bringing up puberty blockers. She was on hormones at this point, not cross-sex hormones. She was on the pill to halt her periods because she found them, quote unquote, triggering. I still cringe when I remember going to the doctors with her and saying to the doctor, he wants to stop his periods. Because, they're making her feel or him feel dysphoric. And even taking her own hormones, were really quite detrimental. She put on a lot of weight. She developed, acne. Her mood changes, were evident. And so
there you go. Describe the mood changes, because I've heard enough from these detransitioners as they were reflecting on, so girls taking male hormones, taking testosterone, that there are some significant mood changes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I can attribute the mood changes to the hormones, because she was also quite badly self-harming and things. But it was very up and down. She was also on quite a lot of social media, so she was still on TikTok at this point. I hadn't realized just how dangerous TikTok was. And I think that probably played a part. But yeah, certainly, it was, it did a lot of damage, I think. When you think that she was only 12 and a smidgen, when she went on the pill, it's just too young to be introducing, any kind of, artificial synthetic hormones into the body, even if they're your own, to be pumping them full of, anything extra and above. And I think it also goes for, puberty blockers, if they're, blocking their own hormones, or cross hormones where they're pumping them full of, the opposite sex hormones. It's just not natural. And as soon as I came to realize that, I talked her into coming off them, which was quite successful. But going back to what led me to sort of do the research, it was hearing about puberty blockers. Then she started talking about getting a quote unquote penis. And she just said, I remember her saying, "Oh, it's really easy, Mum. They just take a bit of skin off your arm, and they turn it into a penis." And I just thought, what? That doesn't sound right. I thought, I'm not a man. I don't have a penis, but that still doesn't sound like that would really work. And so, they went to their fathers for the whole of Easter last year. So I took the opportunity to delve online. And I went onto YouTube for something other than music videos for the first time in probably ever. YouTube's now probably my best friend. But I actually typed in trans woman, was the first thing I typed in. And I was quite lucky that the first group of videos that came up were of a man called Blair White. I don't know whether you've heard of him. But he's actually a quote unquote trans woman, who's quite gender critical. And despite him identifying as a woman. And the first video that came up was the latest one that he did, which was about Leah Thomas winning the NCAA swimming race, against Riley Thomas. And that sort of made me raise an eyebrow. And it just kind of went on from there, and I discovered Magdalene Burns, who's sadly not with us anymore, but she did a lot of videos several years ago before she passed. She was just amazing. And from there, I discovered Kelly J. Keane, Posey Parker, and I'm now part of Standing for Women. I run the Lincolnshire page for Standing for Women, and I am joining the Party of Women political party and standing as MP next year. That's a whole other story, so I'm going off on a tangent. But yeah, so I peaked here.
It's good because through that you've certainly seen, and you've been on the receiving end of the full spectrum of this movement, where as an unsuspecting parent, you're just trying to help facilitate a normal or well-adjusted child. You see a child that is in distress or really wants something, and the people that you are trusting, the adults, are saying, oh, this is a positive thing. And then in your journeys, you then have encountered the full spectrum of what this movement really is all about, which is anything but supporting kids and families. This thing it has an agenda, and it ultimately hates women, right? If a woman speaks up, she's going to be in trouble. She's going to be labeled a TERF, a trans-exclusionary radical feminist, which is a silly term, because all they're saying is men don't belong in women's private spaces, meaning restrooms, washrooms, bathrooms, toilets, shower areas, change rooms. Men don't belong in that. They don't belong in women's prisons. They don't belong in rape shelters. They don't belong in there. Why? Because only deviant men, only sexually deviant men who've been accessing porn would presume to go in those spaces. Why would they want to? For clear reasons, to be able to gain access to women in different stages of undressing, and children as well. And you notice they always have their cell phone with them as well. So these are perverted men. How can I say it? Because I work with sex offenders. So these are dangerous men, and we are putting women and children in harm's way, because ultimately behind this push, if you step up and say, this is not right, now you're going to encounter the activists. And behind the activists then are these deviant men that are cross-dressing, wearing women's underwear and cross-dressing. And suddenly you find a whole nother echelon that is pushing this, a very radical element, the radical trans activists that ultimately are the ones trying to gain access to children, because these deviant individuals know that the last hurdle to gaining hands-on access, unfettered access to kids, are protective mama bear women. And that's why they also hate women. They develop a malevolence toward women through accessing so much pornography. Pornography creates a malevolence in men. It changes them deviant, which means they can only get aroused when they know they are perpetrating harm, when they're traumatizing a woman. So no normal man thinks it's a reasonable thing to put his hand around the throat of a woman, whether in 50 Shades of Grey or anything. So that's how deviant these are. And so Jane and your organizations, you've seen these different men that have virtually, she had to leave for her life when she was in, was it New Zealand? Or in Australia?
Yeah.
In Australia as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm also a trained domestic violence advocate, and part of my training was to...
I'm sorry, it's Kelly J. Keene. I have to get the name.
Yeah,
Kelly J. Keene. That's right.
Yeah.
Right. They hate strong women.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, part of the risk assessment for that is done on victims of domestic violence when they leave, that I've trained in, is called the DASH risk assessment, domestic abuse, stalking and honor-based violence risk assessment. One of the high risk factors is hands around the throat. That is immediately a high risk factor, because once they do that, then they don't go back. And obviously sexual degradation is another high risk factor, and suicidal ideation is the third one. So yeah, it's all sort of there, and it does cross over, definitely.
So you're a mother, you were trying to facilitate what you thought was a helpful thing for your daughter, and then you find out that it's detrimental. You awakened to the harms in so many different ways. You've spoken to the cult-like element. So talk to the parent that is where you are or where you were. Talk to us what that was like as far as the transition, because you mentioned social media, which has become such an influence and such a part of your daughter's life. Talk to us about what you had to do with social media with your daughter.
Yeah, well, the main thing I would say is get nosy, get involved in your child, whether they're your daughter or your son. Get involved in their life, certainly with their phone. I mean, looking back, I wouldn't have decided for my daughters to have had smartphones. Their father bought them both a smartphone shortly after I fled. He still has control over their smartphones. He pays their monthly contract, so it's really hard still. However, as soon as I delved into what she was doing online, certainly, as well as messages that were being passed to and from her friendship groups, I was appalled, and I really kicked myself for not realizing this way sooner. Kids are pretty tech savvy, and I remember when I was a kid. I'm only in my mid-40s, so I still definitely remember being a teenager. There were no phones around when I was a teenager, but I was a little terror. I hated my parents. My friends were my family. I lied to them every chance I got. And teenagers do that now. Even the nice ones because they want to rebel, and they want that independence, and they think that they know everything. They think that they're a lot more grown up than they are, and that's all part of being a teenager, and all part of puberty. But I think that mixed with smartphones and the internet is a really dangerous combination. And parents need to realize that 100%.
You mentioned that you started to see texts. What we have shared with parents on this program is that the trans movement is the perfect cover for sexual predators. So you have financial predators that are after our kids because they're happy to, they're medical white-collar psychopaths. Or they're happy to slice off breasts and other body organs for a profit. There's other interests to move an ideology, to move even a country's morals and Western civilization. There's those influences. But then there's predators that ultimately are after gaining access to kids. One of the things that the trans movement is facilitating is doing an end run on age of consent. So pedophiles are behind that. But embedded in this movement are sexual predators, and sexual predators have no problem pretending to be a child or a young person to engage someone. These predators often have multiple social media accounts. I can't tell you how many guys in my sex offender treatment groups, both in prison and now in the community, are extremely tech savvy. So they know how to utilize the internet. A lot of these guys have IT backgrounds. And so these young kids are sitting ducks. So what did you find in terms of the texts, the messages that you mentioned that really opened your eyes to the dangers?
Yeah, there were DMs on TikTok and Snapchat I found, and direct messages from quote-unquote teenage trans men. So people that were pretending to identify, as far as I'm concerned, pretending to identify in the same category as my daughter, and having these very, very deep conversations and getting very personal and intimate very quickly. So it was a lot of, you're the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I love you. Where are you? What are you doing now? What are you wearing? Things like that, oh, you're so handsome. You make a great boy. All this sort of stuff. And a lot of it was, in my view, too mature to be from a teenage girl. And it drew up some very, very real red flags for me. I screenshotted them straight away and then just got her off all of that social media. I deleted it all and just wiped it all off her phone, and put on an app that flags up to me every time she tries to download anything now. I get a ping on my phone. So it's not foolproof, and I'm aware of that. I still check her phone periodically. I don't warn her. I just do it. To be fair, she's very compliant. She always has been, to be fair. Even though I do still find some dodgy bits and pieces on there and pull her up on it. But yeah, it was very eye-opening. And I think you're right, they're everywhere, these paedophiles, sexual deviants. The creators of this whole movement were paedophiles. If you look at Alfred Kinsey and John Money, and then you've got in this country the paedophile exchange, information exchange in the 1970s and 80s, and now we have the quote-unquote MAP, minor attractive persons movement, that's going on right now, just trying to normalize it. And this is another slightly controversial thing. I think that they are fighting for to get into the alphabet soup, personally. I think that's their end goal.
Yes, they are. Right. James Cantor is pushing that as well. He's out of Ontario, Canada. He's an academic. Right. They want to add the P, which stands for pedophile, to that alphabet soup, the LGBTQRST. So they believe that pedophiles should be granted civil rights protection so that they can't be prosecuted. And actually, then it flips the tables where they're given preferential treatment. And so that there's a very active push right now because they know that it's not popular and they can't get it through legislatures if they're going to come right out and say, we want to lower the age of consent. So they know, or we also want to legalize pedophilia. So they know they can't do that. So they're going to do an end run by getting civil rights protected status for pedophiles. And they're making a lot of progress. That's what's very concerning.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, it's terrifying.
And they'll do it on both ends. They will try to downplay who pedophiles are, so they'll never talk about that they are porn-saturated predators. And before porn, there's always been pedophiles, so the issue is deviance. But ever since pornography and the internet, it has supercharged the process. So we're creating more pedophiles than ever before. So on the one hand, pedophiles are trying to rebrand themselves, as you referenced, minor attracted persons or MAPS. So that is a lie, right? That these people are born that way. So they still use that, or they're co-opting that term. But they're also now floating the idea of mature young people, that these young people are more mature than their age. And pedophiles have always done that. But I'm seeing that more and more in terminology out there online, and so they are relentless.
Well, that's part of what they're pushing with the puberty blockers and the cross-sex hormones, and breast amputation on girls as young as 12 in some parts of California. And it's their argument that these kids, well, they are kids, but they call them these young people, young adults. Can make these decisions for themselves, and that it's innate, and that they're, like say, they're born this way, and if they can apply it to one thing, they can apply it to other things. And we've all seen enough videos of these men filming themselves in bathrooms. I don't know why people don't see those sorts of videos and see and aren't horrified. I just don't understand it. But there you go.
Yeah, these are predatory individuals. Even the men they're dressing up as baby dolls and in diapers. These are all very sexually deviant men. That's why they're doing what they're doing.
Even my daughter went through a stage of using dummies. I mean, she never had a dummy as a child, as a baby. She's my eldest, so I didn't need to pacify her. But she explored the dummy things and stuff, and at the time I didn't know what it was all about, and now I just think, oh my goodness, it's all part of the grooming process.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Talor, so when you use the term dummy, what do you mean by that?
A pacifier.
Okay. Yeah, and again, what's behind it?
I bought her some when she asked for them. Oh.
Because sexually deviant men, they will tend downward in terms of age. And so when they are dressed up as babies, what do you think they're looking at online behind the scenes? They're accessing child porn. And so if they can get older kids to start dressing that way, that's why in pornography, it reaches what's called barely legal. So the women will tend to look younger and younger, and they will dress the children up to look older and older, and it converges about the age of 12. And the pedophiles will continue downward in terms of age, and as they're descending, they will get into different categories of pornography, one of which is bestiality. That is being rebranded within the furry community as zoophiles. So behind the scenes, and this material is being brought into schools through the SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity, sex ed. All these concepts, these fetishes, which is really just perversion, are being introduced to these kids. So it's very dangerous. Talor, speak to the parents that know they are going to have a difficult time. What did you go through? What kind of pushback with your child, and where are you at now in terms of your relationship with your daughter?
Yeah, that was a tough time, because we got on really quite well. Certainly when she first came out as quote unquote a trans man, and I was affirming, I became sort of the ally. You know, I was the one in her corner. And then when I peaked, I became her worst enemy for a period of time, and things did get really rough. She beat me up on a couple of occasions. She's about the same size as me now. I'm very small. And she's probably stronger than me now, but even a year and a half ago, yeah, she was pretty mighty, and took a few swings at me, kicked me across the room on one occasion. Obviously, she was disciplined for it, but it was tough. She talked about moving back to her dad, which was not easy because I knew how much of a tough time she'd had down there. So I think that probably went on for a number of months. But I'd made the decision. And when I decide on something, I'm quite stubborn. I also have a big mouth, and I can't keep my opinions to myself. My kids will tell you that. I just stood firm. And now, we have our moments. I still send her some things, documentaries and things, if I come across something particularly poignant. In fact, there was one documentary that came out on Epoch Times, and I think it can only still be viewed on Epoch Times, which is a subscription, but it's very cheap. And it was predominantly, I had a lot of experts and detransitioners on there, but it was predominantly the story of, I think her name was Yuli. She was the daughter of a woman called Abigail, who's based in California, and the daughter was brainwashed by her school and by her Gay Straight Alliance club or LGBT club in school into thinking that she was trans, and California actually took her off her mum and put her into care because her mum didn't affirm her. And the tragic thing is that the story ends when Yuli was 19. I think this happened about 2 years ago. Her mum now speaks out publicly. She knelt in front of a train and killed herself. And that was probably the last documentary I asked my daughter to watch, which was about 3 or 4 months ago. And we don't talk about it a huge amount these days, but occasionally I will say, I've just come across this and I can't let it go without you having a look. Please have a look. And to be fair, she does. And I think that documentary did affect her. But we had a really long conversation about her name, because I still allow her friends and for it to be a nickname at her school. So it's not on official documents at school anymore. But I did say to the teachers, if she really wants it as a nickname, and some of the teachers want to use that as a nickname, that's fine, because the name she chose, funnily enough, is actually quite unisex. And so she did have an issue for quite a long time about the name issue. She didn't have too much of an issue over the pronouns after a few months, but the name has always been a bit of a sticking point. And I just said to her, to me, this is an act of love, that I'm keeping you based in reality. I can't lie to you. And that's the way I always say that to her. It's really easy to turn around, and I have been guilty of it way more than one occasion. So I'm far from perfect, of just blowing up and, flying off the handle at your children, because sometimes they just come out with the most insane things, and just, screaming and shouting. But really what it comes down to, and I help quite a few parents on a one-to-one basis now over the phone, is I just say, just keep telling them that you appreciate where they're coming from, you understand how they feel, but you can't lie to them. And you can't lie to them because you love them that much, and you're not willing to leave reality, even if it makes them feel happier in the moment. And that's the way that's how I always say it to her. And she is starting to come around now. And we're really close again, to be fair. Yeah, we do a lot of stuff together, and she leans on me a lot. So, yeah, I think we're coming out the other side. Fingers crossed.
That was very powerful that all parents need to hear. Holy cow. Very well done. Well spoken, well said. Thank you, Talor, for that.
Thank you.
Talor, thank you. Thank you for being willing to educate us and share your difficult story. And you're brave. I commend you. Brad, we're so appreciative that you saw the light and you were willing to humble yourself enough to put a stop to things. And not a lot of parents are willing to, so hopefully they will derive strength.
We say put a stop, but it's really open communication. That's right. Really started to communicate with your daughter, your child, your offspring, and you've managed to allow them the freedom to explore, yet at the same time have them understand what reality really is about versus living in some fantasy. So, if there's parents out there that are confused and troubled and don't know what to do, I think Talor just gave you a great example and a great mission to go accomplish for yourselves, to get involved. Because if you don't get involved, things aren't going to go very well. It's going to be a real rough ride.
Yep. And it really is.
Short-term pain for long-term gain.
That's right, Talor. And to emphasize what you said, that you could not continue to push what is not true. So to get your daughter to think, to provide the information, to make an informed decision is what you've done, and we commend you for that. Brad, as always, these are compelling programs.
100%. Thank you to both of you for being here. I know this is one of the most advantageous episodes for our viewers to embark down. This comes from experience. This isn't clinical. This isn't theory. It's not coming from academics. It's coming from a real mom who's lived it and who has actually been able to maneuver her way through it in a way that has caused the least amount of damage as possible to get through it. And that for me is something that I think that is the biggest take home from today's 2 episodes, and we really do want you to go back and watch episode 1 as well. If you started on number 2, go back and watch 1. You won't get all mixed up. You're going to stay right on track with everything that Talor and John have said here today. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. Thanks again to both of you for being here. I'm Brad Wilder. Till next time, remember, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight. Now is the time to stand up. I'll see you soon.